The market has always been the cruelest of masters, and it tests a man not when he is building, but when it strips him bare. To watch an account, once swollen with triumph, drain into nothing is to feel the weight of every mistake etched into one's bones. Yet ruin, as devastating as it appears, is not final unless a man himself accepts it as such. Many who walk the floor, many who study the tape, many who speculate with fire in their veins, collapse under the first true blow. They confuse disaster with death, and once they do, the market no longer needs to take their money. It has taken their will. What separates the broken from the unbroken is not skill or luck or the brilliance of a single trade. It is the recognition that a fall, however brutal, is part of the natural rhythm of speculation. Prices rise, and they collapse. Fortunes swell, and they are reduced to ashes. The fall is not a deviation, it is the rule. Every great ascent in speculation carries within it the shadow of destruction. The man who speculates without ever falling is either new to the game or lying about his past. The one who falls and believes it to be the final chapter has misunderstood the very nature of the market. When the greatest fall arrived, it came not as a quiet decline, but as an avalanche. The weight of leverage, the overconfidence of prior victories, the blindness that comes from believing oneself above the laws of the market, all conspired together. Days stretched into nights with prices sliding further, and each rally mocked the hope of recovery. The tape does not lie, and it showed loss after loss. What had taken years to build was gone in a fraction of the time. The air seemed heavier, the streets quieter, and the very ground beneath one's feet felt uncertain. A man could not even look into a mirror without seeing not himself, but the shadow of his own ruin. Yet there is something instructive in devastation. A man who has tasted great loss comes face to face with the truth that money is not the end, but the byproduct. The real treasure lies in the mind that earned it once and can earn it again. The account can be emptied, but the discipline, the experience, the scars of former battles, these cannot be erased unless the man himself allows them to vanish. The fall teaches what no victory can, that pride is fatal, that risk must be respected, and that the market will never bend to one's will. The hardest truth to accept in those dark days was not that the money was gone, but that the fault lay within. The market is merciless but never unfair. Every point lost had a reason. Every dollar vanished because of a decision. And yet, within that cruel arithmetic is the seed of rebirth. If ruin was the result of errors, then recovery could be the result of corrected errors. If pride blinded the eye, humility could clear it. If haste dug the pit, patience could fill it. The fall strips away the illusions that comfort a man when fortune smiles on him. The crowd, once loud with admiration, turns silent. Friends who praised the brilliance of one's judgment vanish into the fog. Newspapers that once reported with awe now whisper of foolishness. The applause dies, and in its place grows an echo of failure. That echo rings in the mind of the man who has fallen, and it can either haunt him into paralysis or drive him into a new clarity. When stripped of flattery, of false security, of imagined genius, the true man is revealed. It is in that nakedness, staring at the ruins, that a man decides whether he will remain broken or begin again. The fall was not the end, because the story was never about one victory or one defeat. The story of speculation is a saga of cycles, of booms and busts, of endless battles between greed and fear. The market is infinite, but the man is finite, and so his endurance is tested not once but continually. A fortune lost is not the closing of a door, but the striking of a bell that tolls a new beginning. Those who walk away in despair never hear it. Those who remain know that the toll is both punishment and invitation. The market's cruelty is matched only by its generosity. It does not care for yesterday's loss. It does not remember yesterday's mistake. Each day begins fresh, with prices moving as if nothing has been written before. The tape has no memory, but the man does, and therein lies the challenge, to look at the fresh page of the market and not stain it with the grief of yesterday. The fall teaches the danger of dragging the past into the present. To rise again requires the courage to see the new day for what it is. An opportunity unchained from prior ruin. A fall so great reshapes not just accounts but character. It forces a man to strip speculation back to its bones, to remember why he entered the market in the first place. Was it greed for applause? Was it hunger for the illusion of invincibility? Or was it the fascination with the movement of prices, the challenge of reading the pulse of the world through numbers and patterns? Those who return for the applause will fail again. Those who return for the game itself, who learn to love the study, the patience, the discipline, will find their way back. When the fall came, it destroyed the fortune, but not the capacity to build it again. The collapse was a teacher, and though it extracted its tuition in blood and gold, the lesson it left behind was priceless. The lesson was this, that the market does not end a man, only the man himself can do that. To accept ruin as final is to bury oneself alive. To see ruin as another turn in the cycle is to step forward, leaner and sharper than before. And so, the fall was endured, not as a death but as a transformation. It revealed weaknesses. It burned away arrogance. It purified motives. It hurt, as all true lessons do. But it also opened the path to something greater. For a man who is lost and still stands, there is nothing left to fear, and when fear dies, the market can no longer enslave him. Instead, it becomes once again the great field of opportunity it always was, waiting for the patient, the disciplined, and the unbroken to claim what is theirs. When the dust of a collapse finally settles, what remains is not noise but silence. The noise has already had its say, the shouts on the exchange floor, the chatter of brokers insisting they saw it coming, the newspapers gloating over another speculator brought low. All that clamor fades when the last position has been liquidated, and the final margin call is answered. What lingers is the stillness of a man left alone with the ruins of his own fortune. It is in that quiet, stripped of all pretense, that the first breath of recovery begins. Silence has a weight of its own. It presses on the chest in the lonely hours when there is no telephone ringing, no partner offering advice, no clerk rushing in with figures. It isolates a man from the world that only yesterday seemed to orbit around him. But silence, though it feels like exile, is not an enemy. It is the first companion of rebirth, for in that hollow, when there are no voices to drown out thought, a man must confront the truest conversation, the one with himself. The ashes of ruin are not just the remnants of lost money. They are the residue of pride, of arrogance, of mistaken certainties. In the silence, one begins to sift through them, examining each fragment for what it once represented. Every forgotten rule, every reckless trade, every warning ignored stands exposed in the ashes. There are no excuses here, no one to blame. The market does not take losses because it hates a man. It takes losses because it is indifferent. And so the silence forces a man to face the truth that his own hand guided him to the precipice. In those first days after the fall, there is nothing to do but endure the quiet. Friends may offer sympathy, but their words ring hollow. Their pity does not rebuild what was lost. Their kindness cannot erase the gnawing memory of numbers falling against one's favor. The market continues without care, ticking along as if nothing happened, and the man who fell watches in stillness, cut off from the flow. That disconnection is a torment at first, like being cast into exile from the only city one ever knew. But gradually, as the days stretch, the exile becomes a sanctuary. For in that distance the market begins to look different, less like a battlefield, more like a living force, with patterns to be studied rather than conquered. The silence in the ashes becomes the teacher no man seeks, but every man needs. It whispers that speculation is not about constant motion. It reminds that the greatest danger lies in the desperate urge to trade after a disaster, to claw back what was lost with frantic hands. Many men rush from the ashes into another gamble, their hearts still beating with the panic of loss. They mistake action for salvation, but the silence tells a different story. It says, wait. It says, sit. It says, learn again what you once knew, but forgot. In that waiting, the mind sharpens. Patterns long overlooked begin to reappear in the imagination. The memory of former victories, clouded by the sting of ruin, begins to settle into clarity. Each mistake, once painful, transforms into instruction. The silence allows these lessons to take root, undisturbed by the noise of advice, uncorrupted by the whispers of the crowd. Only in solitude can a man see the tape for what it is, a mirror reflecting not just prices, but his own discipline or lack thereof. There is also a dignity to silence. The world may chatter, but the man who has fallen learns that no explanation he offers will change their judgment. Words wasted on defense only deepen the wound. Better to say nothing, to let the world talk itself tired, while within the quiet he tends to the rebuilding of his strength. Dignity does not come from defiance nor from denial. It comes from the calm acceptance of what has happened, and the refusal to let others write the final line of the story. The ashes are his, and so too will be the rebirth. As the days turn into weeks, the silence begins to change character. What was once oppressive becomes steadying. The solitude that seemed unbearable transforms into discipline. The mind, once scattered in panic, grows centered. Out of the ashes, a man discovers that he does not need constant action to exist, nor the applause of others to confirm his worth. He finds strength in restraint, in waiting, in listening. That listening becomes the foundation of a new way forward. The silence also clears the air of illusions. In the heat of speculation, surrounded by clamor, a man can mistake luck for skill, fortune for genius. He can begin to believe the crowd's applause, to take pride in being called shrewd or daring. But when silence comes, there is no audience. In the ashes, there is no stage. There is only truth. If a fortune was built on arrogance, silence reveals it. If losses came from carelessness, silence admits it. There is no room for pretense. And in stripping away falsehoods, the silence returns a man to the ground on which he must rebuild. Some men cannot bear that quiet. They run from it, seeking distraction in society, drowning their thoughts in noise, convincing themselves they are still what they once were. But that is a deception, and the silence will wait for them, growing heavier the longer it is delayed. To face it early is to suffer swiftly and begin again. To avoid it is to remain half ruined, a shadow of a man forever fleeing the truth of his collapse. The silence in the ashes, then, is not the end of activity, but its preparation. It is the pause before the next act. It is the purging of the fever that led to destruction. It is the soil in which patience, discipline, and humility can grow. For when the silence has done its work, the man emerges not frantic, but measured, not desperate, but deliberate. He returns to the market not as a gambler clawing for redemption, but as a student ready to listen again to what the tape has always been saying. And so, the silence becomes the hidden ally of every recovery. It demands endurance. It demands honesty. It demands patience in the ashes. It may feel like emptiness, but in truth, it is fullness, a clearing of the old to make way for the new. It is the sound of pride burning away, leaving only discipline behind. It is the quiet in which the seeds of the next fortune are planted, even before the first trade is ever made again. The market does not reward those who rush at it with reckless hands. nor those who scramble to claw back what was lost in the heat of desperation. Its favor rests instead on the shoulders of those who can endure stillness, who can sit before the moving tape without feeling compelled to act on every flicker of price. The patient watcher understands that opportunity does not come with every tick, nor even with every day. It comes rarely, quietly, and with subtle signs that only a disciplined eye can detect. The market is like a river, constant in its motion. Yet only at certain bends does it reveal the current strong enough to carry a man forward. After disaster, the first instinct is always to act. Loss burns in the veins like fire, and the hand longs to strike quickly, to make a trade that will erase the sting. But the patient watcher knows that nothing is more dangerous than a trade born of vengeance against the market. The tape does not care for the wounded pride of a man. It punishes him all the more for daring to impose his need upon it. In those hours, when pain presses hardest, the greatest discipline is to remain still. To watch prices move and yet do nothing, for every act of restraint plants the seed of future strength, while every rash gamble digs the pit deeper. The patience of the watcher is not idleness to the untrained eye. He may appear inactive, but within his silence there is intense labor. Each fluctuation is studied, each movement weighed, not as a call to action but as a piece of a larger puzzle. He waits for the alignment of conditions that only comes when the market reveals its hand. Most men cannot endure this waiting. They grow restless, mistaking inaction for weakness. But the patient watcher knows that true strength lies in resisting the impulse to act before the time is ripe. It is in this stillness that the market begins to speak clearly. Amid the noise of constant trading, patterns are obscured, but to the one who waits, the noise settles into rhythm. Trends are not sudden. They build quietly, like waves gathering in the distance before crashing on shore. The watcher sees the gathering before the crash. He understands that the market does not hide its secrets, so much as it reveals them slowly, offering hints only to those willing to observe without haste. The patient watcher also learns that opportunities must be rare to be real. The market may move in thousands of directions each day, but only a handful of those movements are worth staking one's capital upon. The rest are traps, false starts, and noise meant to lure the greedy. To act on every movement is to drown in the river. To wait for the few true waves is to ride them with power. The watcher, therefore, places few trades, but each one is entered with precision, backed not by guesswork, but by the weight of long observation. Patience transforms the relationship between man and market. For the impulsive trader, every tick is a threat, every fluctuation a command to act. He is at the mercy of the tape reacting rather than directing. But the watcher who waits sees beyond the immediate. He is not swayed by the crowd's excitement, nor frightened by its panic. He waits as a hunter waits, knowing that the prey must eventually step into the open. And when it does, the strike is swift and sure, because it has been prepared through long study. After a ruinous fall, patience is not just a strategy. It is salvation. Recovery cannot be achieved through a single desperate stroke. It comes slowly, rebuilt through careful steps. The watcher, having endured the silence of the ashes, knows that haste would only repeat the errors of the past. He watches not just the market but himself, guarding against the old impulses that once led him astray. His patience is not passive. It is active resistance against his own weakness. This discipline also brings a new kind of confidence. The man who waits without fear of missing out learns that the market will always offer another chance. There is no final train that departs never to return. There is always another movement, another cycle, another trend to ride. The impatient man, convinced that every opportunity is the last, throws himself into traps. The watcher, calm in his waiting, lets the false opportunities pass by, saving his strength for the one that matters. And when that moment comes, his account is intact, his mind clear, his judgment sharp. The patient watcher also begins to see what others cannot. The crowd, caught in its frenzy, chases every rally and panics at every decline. They see only the surface of the market, but the watcher, standing apart, perceives the undercurrents. He sees the exhaustion in a rally before it collapses, the strength in a decline before it reverses. He sees the points where greed has overextended itself, where fear has become excessive. These are the moments when fortunes are made, and they reveal themselves only to the eye trained by patience. Patience, then, is not merely waiting. It is a form of power. It grants clarity. It sharpens perception. It strengthens discipline. It allows the man who has fallen to rise not as he was before, but as something stronger. His losses taught him the cost of haste. His silence taught him the value of reflection. And his watching teaches him the rhythm of opportunity. The market, cruel as it is, cannot resist forever. Eventually, it must reveal the kind of move that rewards those who are willing to outweight the noise. And so the watcher sits, day after day, unmoved by the chatter of the crowd or the sting of his own past. He waits for the tape to align, for the signs to converge, for the market to present the rare chance worth taking. And when it does, he is ready. Not because of luck, not because of impulse, but because patience has made him sharper than the rest. In the end, the market does not reward the man who trades most often, nor the one who shouts the loudest. It rewards the one who can endure the quiet, who can resist the urge to act until the moment is right, and who knows that true fortune belongs not to the restless, but to the patient watcher. When a man has endured the violence of a fall, his first temptation is to search for a grand recovery, a single strike that will restore all that was lost. Pride whispers that one bold move could repair the damage, that one decisive gamble might rebuild a fortune overnight. But that is the very trap that leads to ruin again. The truth, harsh as it may seem, is that the climb back does not begin with great leaps, but with smaller steps. The man who rebuilds wisely does not rush to grasp at castles in the clouds. He lays bricks one by one, patient and deliberate, until the foundation is firm once again. In the aftermath of devastation, the impulse to risk heavily is strong, because the memory of wealth still clings to the mind. A man remembers the days when his account was flush, when profits came easily, when his name was whispered with awe. He imagines that by pressing hard, he might return to that standing quickly. But what he forgets is that the same recklessness which destroyed him still burns inside, waiting for another chance to drag him down. Smaller steps protect against that hunger. They force humility. They demand patience. They strip the market of its glamour and return it to what it truly is, a place where capital must be preserved at all costs. The discipline of smaller steps begins with modest trades, not in size but in spirit. Each position is entered with careful thought, each risk calculated with exacting precision. The goal is not to win big but to avoid losing again. Every trade becomes a lesson in control. It is not about recovering a fortune, but about recovering oneself. And in recovering oneself, the fortune follows. This is the paradox many fail to grasp. They think that money is rebuilt by chasing it. In truth, it is rebuilt by chasing discipline. The money comes as the shadow of discipline, never as its substitute. In those early steps back, patience becomes a weapon sharper than any bold strategy. A man who once wagered heavily must learn the power of restraint, to trade only when the conditions align, to take profits even when they seem small, to guard against the greed that whispers just a little more. Smaller steps condition the mind to think not in terms of glory but in terms of survival. And when survival is mastered, growth naturally follows. These smaller steps are also the proving ground of humility. To trade in modest amounts after once, commanding great fortunes is a test that many cannot endure. Pride recoils at the sight of gains that would once have seemed trivial. But pride is a luxury for the broken. It is better to take small profits with humility than to risk everything again for the sake of appearances. Humility in the market is not weakness. It is strength disguised. It is the acknowledgement that the market is greater than any man, and that survival requires respect for its power. Every small trade becomes a stone in the foundation of recovery. Over time, these stones accumulate, and what seemed insignificant begins to take shape. A man looks at his account one day and realizes that the ashes have begun to sprout new life. It is not a fortune yet, but it is steady, it is real. And most importantly, it is built on discipline rather than arrogance. That realization is more valuable than any quick profit could ever be, because it proves that the man has changed. He has learned the hardest lesson, that fortune is not restored in one sweeping gesture, but in countless deliberate actions. The discipline of smaller steps also protects against the market's traps. In the rush to recover, many leap too soon, mistaking noise for opportunity, hope for certainty. They risk heavily, and when the market turns against them, as it always does at times, they have nothing left. The man of smaller steps, by contrast, risks little and therefore loses little. His capital remains intact, and with capital intact, he always has another chance. This simple truth separates those who recover from those who vanish. The ones who endure are those who protect their ammunition. Smaller steps ensure that the ammunition is never spent recklessly. With each modest gain, confidence returns. Not the false confidence of arrogance, but the true confidence born of discipline. A man learns that he can win again, that he can act with control, that he can face the market without trembling. This new confidence is different from the old, for it is grounded not in pride, but in proof. It is earned by action, by repetition, by the slow accumulation of victories, and because it is earned, it cannot be shaken easily. As the account grows, so too does the man's perspective. He no longer dreams of instant restoration, for he has come to understand that slow growth is stronger than rapid ascent. He begins to see the market not as a place of constant conquest, but as a field of opportunity that must be tended carefully. He becomes more selective, more cautious, more deliberate. Each step is measured not by how quickly it brings him back to his former glory, but by how firmly it plants him on the ground. The discipline of smaller steps does not mean abandoning ambition. It means channeling ambition through discipline. It means setting aside the desire for grand strokes until the foundation is steady enough to support them. Eventually, the man who has rebuilt through modest means will find himself in a position once again to act boldly. But when that time comes, he will act not from desperation, not from pride, but from strength. His boldness will be earned, justified, and supported by the weight of a disciplined foundation. The greatest lesson of the smaller steps is this, that survival is the first victory, and growth is the second. To endure after ruin is itself a triumph. To begin again, modestly, patiently, without surrendering to despair, is the act of a stronger man than the one who never fell. The market does not care for how grand a man once was. It cares only for how disciplined he is now. And discipline, when expressed through smaller steps, becomes the bridge from ashes to fortune, from collapse to resurgence. Each small trade, each cautious move, each act of restraint adds to the strength of the man who has fallen. Over time, those steps form a path, not just back to where he once stood, but beyond it. For in walking that path, he learns not only how to rebuild wealth, but how to master himself. And the man who has mastered himself, who has proven he can act with restraint, patience, and discipline, is no longer at the mercy of the market. He has become its equal, not because he conquered it, but because he conquered the weakness within that once made him vulnerable. The fall strips away everything that once seemed immovable. It takes the houses built on sand, the illusions of genius, the adoration of the crowd, and it scatters them like dust in the wind. A man who believed himself untouchable finds himself staring at emptiness, his pockets light and his pride shattered. Yet, in that ruin lies the opportunity, for a transformation deeper than any fortune ever purchased. For the man who can endure, who can face his own destruction without surrender, there waits not just a return, but a rebirth. To rise stronger than before is not merely to reclaim what was lost. It is to rise with a clarity that only fire can forge. When fortune smiles without interruption, a man becomes swollen with pride. He believes his judgment to be flawless, his instincts infallible. The market seems to bend to his will, and he begins to mistake luck for destiny. The fall, therefore, is not only a punishment, but a cleansing. It strips from him the vanity that blinded him, the arrogance that deafened him, the illusions that softened his discipline. What remains after such a fire is the raw core of a man. And it is in this core that true strength is born. The first strength that emerges is humility. A man who has tasted ruin cannot afford to strut as he once did. He knows how swiftly the market can humble him, how little it cares for his opinions, how indifferent it is to his desires. This humility is not weakness, it is armor. For arrogance blinds a man to danger, but humility sharpens his vision. Arrogance leads him to overreach, but humility teaches him to protect his capital as the lifeblood it is. Where once he chased every opportunity, now he waits, cautious and deliberate, because he has learned that there is no shame in restraint. The fall has carved away his illusions, and in their place it has left a quiet strength. The second strength is discipline before the collapse. Discipline may have been practiced, but it was not absolute. Pride makes room for exceptions, and exceptions pave the way to disaster. But after ruin, a man learns that every rule ignored carries its price, and that price is always greater than expected. To rise stronger means to rebuild, not only accounts but habits. Every trade becomes measured, every risk weighed with precision, every temptation tested against the lessons written in blood and loss. The man who has fallen no longer toys with danger. He respects it, acknowledges it, and masters himself, so that he does not fall prey again to his own weakness. The third strength is resilience. When a man has already endured the worst, fear loses its grip on him. He knows the taste of ashes, he knows the sting of failure, and yet he still stands. This knowledge changes him. Fear, which once dictated his actions, urging him to sell too soon, to panic in declines, to grasp at rallies, is no longer his master. He has already met the monster in the dark, and he survived. Now he acts not from fear, but from understanding. He knows that losses will come, but he also knows that they do not end him. This resilience gives him a steadiness that cannot be shaken by the noise of the crowd. The fourth strength is patience. In the years of pride, he may have chased every flicker of movement, desperate to capture each profit. But ruin teaches that fortune is not built by constant activity, but by deliberate action. Rising stronger means embracing stillness, waiting for the moment when the market truly reveals its hand. He learns that doing nothing can be as powerful as doing something, that restraint can be the sharpest weapon in a speculator's arsenal. Patience becomes his ally, and through it, he avoids the traps that ensnare the restless. Finally, the greatest strength is perspective. A man who has fallen and risen again no longer views fortune as he once did. Money is important, but it is not everything. Reputation is valuable, but it is fragile. What endures? What truly matters is mastery over oneself. To rise stronger than before is to understand that speculation is not a game of conquest, but a test of character. The market is not an enemy to be defeated, but a force to be respected, studied, and aligned with. The man who understands this rises, not with arrogance, but with clarity, not with desperation, but with calm. When he steps back into the market, he does so with a steadiness unknown to him in the days before his fall. His trades are fewer, but they are sharper. His risks are smaller, but they are surer. His account grows, not in wild leaps, but in steady strides, each one supported by the foundation of discipline, humility, resilience, patience, and perspective. And as it grows, he realizes that he has not merely returned to where he once stood. He has surpassed it, for before, he was rich, but vulnerable. Now, he is wealthy in more than money. He is wealthy in knowledge, in control, in strength of character. The rise after ruin is not a return to the old self, but the creation of a new one. The man who has never fallen may be clever, may be daring, may even be fortunate. But he is untested. The man who has fallen and risen again carries scars, and those scars are his true wealth. They remind him of the cost of arrogance, the danger of haste, the power of discipline. They guide his hand when the crowd screams one way and the tape whispers another. They steel his nerves when others tremble. They make him stronger than any fortune alone could ever make him. To rise stronger than before is not a gift granted by the market. It is earned through pain, through silence, through patience, through countless small steps that rebuild what was lost. It is the product of endurance, of refusing to accept ruin as the final word. And in the end, the man who rises is not merely restored. He is transformed into someone the market can no longer so easily destroy.